Changing the spark plugs on your bike is probably one of the simplest tasks that a do-it-yourselfer can do, but are you doing it right? Odds are you're not. Stick around and find out what you might be doing wrong in this edition of SBTV How To. One of the first steps is checking the plug gap. Plug gap is critical to the plug's performance. If it's too large, then that puts an extra strain on the ignition coil, can cause misfires. There's just not enough energy to bridge that big a gap. If it's too small, there might not be enough space there to properly ignite the air-fuel mixture. That could also cause you some problems. So you got to get the gap right. Now the plugs, typically, they come all right in the box, but not always. It's a good idea to check before you install them in the engine. Here's how. All right, first, forget about those little ramp style feeler gauges that they hand out for free like in like a candy jar at the parts store. They're really just not worth the pot metal they're made out of. And if you're dealing with precious metal plugs, you can actually screw up those new plugs using that type of gap adjuster. Why? The precious metal is usually applied just to the end of that center electrode in there. See if you can see that. And it's very easy to break it off. So if you do that, that plug's trash, you got to go get yourself another one. Now this is a more conventional design, standard center electrode, and we're going to use something that is even better. It's called a round wire feeler gauge, and it's a go no go decision as far as whether the gap's correct. The spec on this plug is 24 to 28, so we're going to stick a 25, see if that goes in. That goes in, and then we're going to take 28, see if that doesn't. That doesn't. So that one's okay, we're ready to put this in the engine. Or are we? Okay, once in a while you're going to run into one that does need to be adjusted. Here's an example. The 25 won't go in, so that's a little too tight. So we're going to use the other end of that round wire feeler gauge tool to just slightly bend that ground electrode. See if I can get that in there where you can see it. Just a little. And then we're going to recheck. Okay, 25 goes, 28 doesn't. Okay, and we'll go ahead and finish that up with the rest of the plugs. Okay, before we put the plugs in the engine, a couple of notes on that. First, a lot of guys swear by the use of anti-seize compound on the threads to keep it from seizing in the aluminum heads that most of these engines are made out of. Now, I'm here to tell you that unless your manufacturer's manual specifically tells you to put it on there, don't. Couple of reasons. Number one, it changes the torque value of the spark plug when you put it in. In other words, if you're going to torque these plugs in place like you should be doing, and which we'll demonstrate in a moment, you're not going to get the right torque reading. It's going to be too loose by the time you're all said and done. The second thing is that compound, if used too much, can actually act as an insulator and keep that plug from grounding properly to the cylinder head. That's bad in two ways. First, it could cause a misfire because electrically the circuit's not complete. It could also cause an overheat condition in the plug because now it is not being able to pass that heat to the cylinder head like it's designed to do. So on the topic of never seize, I think that takes care of that. Don't use it unless the manufacturer of your motorcycle specifically tells you to do so. The next thing we want to do is make sure that the threads in the block are okay. When you take the old plug out, if you notice a lot of debris on there, it's not a bad idea to chase it out with a tap. Just make sure you do a couple of things when you do that. Make sure the valves are not in the way when you do, so you're not hitting those with the tap if you pass it too far through. Put a little grease on the tap threads to catch any debris so it doesn't fall into the engine. And then that should do it. I mean, that should make sure that you don't have any issues there. Make sure that before you take the plugs out of the old engine, you blow some air in there, you get any debris that may be collected around the base of the plug out so that when you take the plug out, that doesn't fall in the motor. Follow all those steps, you should have a nice clean hole to put your nice clean new plug in. All right, with everything clean, we're going to go ahead and put the plugs in. Now, this is something I like to do. I don't want to cross thread the plugs in. You know, this bike's out of the frame, so everything's easy to get to. Sometimes when it's installed, it's not so much. So what I've learned is a little trick where I'm going to take a piece of fuel line and I'm going to put my plug in the fuel line and I'm going to use that to start the plugs in the hole. Let's do that. This allows the plug to find its own seat and I don't have to worry about stripping anything in the process. And we'll run them down as far as they want to go. Okay, well, the plugs run in by hand, just kind of snug. Now we're going to use the torque wrench. In this case, they are set to no spec on them, but for this type of plug, about 10 foot-pounds. So we're going to go ahead and set the gauge for that. And you can Google those specs if you don't have them in your shop manual. We'll just snug that down. There's one. Now, why again is the importance of torquing them in there? If they're too tight, you can crack them. And that could cause misfires. It may not be a crack you can see, but you can separate the shell and the porcelain. And that can lead to some problems. And of course, if it's too loose, it's a matter of heat exchange between the head and the spark plug. Like we talked about in previous videos, if you don't have that mechanic's feel where you know how tight is tight and how loose is loose, then you really should be using a torque wrench. Okay, there we go. Spark plugs are installed. See, I told you there was more about putting spark plugs in your bike than you thought. Well, now you know what the right way to do it is, thanks to another SBTV how-to. We'll see you next time. Did you enjoy the video you just watched? Did you find it helpful? We sure hope so. If you did, make sure you give us a thumbs up and you add your comments to that section right below the player there. And don't forget to share our videos with your Harley riding friends. Once you got all that taken care of, if you want to make sure that you're the first to know about any new videos that we put up online, hit that subscribe button for us. Thanks for watching.